Welcome in, Facebook friends. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We never do this on Facebook, and we're kind of doing it by accident. Tonight, we are using Facebook. They use us on a regular basis. We can use them tonight. All right, we got Tony Siracusa on the line talking UCLA football as the Bruins prepare for a big one on the road against Utah. Tony, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Brother Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. And as we talked about before we started to record, I love oddities in sports. I love strange stats, strange scenarios, just weird things. And your team is 4-5, and at least for the next 2.5 days, we can say that you hold destiny, or as Chip Kelly likes to say, fate, to be more precise, fate in your hands to win the Pac-12 championship. It is possible that in 3 to 4 weeks from right now, we can claim UCLA Pac-12 champions.
Yeah, it is odd, and you got to watch out with that destiny word, because Chip will correct you that destiny is predetermined, and so that can't play a role in this. But yeah, look, I mean, they're 4-5 right now. They're on a 3-game winning streak, but they're 4-5, but they're 4-2 in conference play, which means those losses to Arizona, granted, DTR got hurt in that game, and then the home loss to Oregon State, just unconscionable. Those are kind of coming back to bite you in the rear end a little bit right now. They're looking kind of, big in the rear view mirror right now, because you think of where you could be. Utah is 8-1 overall, 5-1 in conference play. So they are 1 game ahead of USC and UCLA, who are tied for second. And 2 months ago, people were talking about whether Chip Kelly was even going to be around at the end of the season, much less you look at it now. And, Kelly's take on it is typical. It's vintage Chip Kelly. We talked to him today at practice, and Kelly said, it's a big game this week because it's the game we play this week. That's it. That's all you're going to get out of him. He won't acknowledge what's at stake, what's at play with the matchup. He just says it's a huge game because it's the game we play this week, just like the game 2 weeks ago was a huge game because it was the game we played that week. That's as far as you're going to get him to commit on the magnitude of this.
So it's Chip Kelly's version of PJ Flex. This week is the Penn State season. Next week is the Iowa season, and we need to go 1-0 in the Iowa season.
That's it.
Whatever they need to do
really
to get the point across.
Yeah, and his players are really starting to repeat those mantras, and so there's a lot of, maybe they're buying in, maybe they've just heard it so much that that's just what comes out of their mouths now. But we had a few minutes with Boss Tagaloa, the starting center, and he said the same thing. He was like, it's a big game because it's who we play this week, and we've got to do really well, or the games after that aren't going to be as significant. So this is it. This is the game. But, to go back to things Chip Kelly says, we just need to have a good Wednesday. That's where, he likes to say he operates in the micro world, in the microcosm. That is the ultimate microcosm. He wouldn't look past today's practice. Just like we're just trying to have a good Wednesday and make it better than Tuesday. That's it. That's as much commitment as you're going to get from him.
If I recall, the team was in a similar state at this point, maybe a little bit earlier last year, when despite some abysmal early season showings, they played themselves in position very early in the conference season to, again, technically be eligible to win the championship. And then they ran into Utah, and it was like 41-10. It was extremely ugly at the Rose Bowl. The pessimist in me, Tony, when I see that UCLA is on a 3-game winning streak, and I check out all the scores and the box scores every week, as I am apt to do as the voice of college football. But just to remind myself here, the pessimist in me says, okay, who have they beaten? And it's not the elite of the Pac-12, of course, but still, what have they done over the past 3 weeks against the likes of Stanford, Arizona State, which was playing extremely good football at that point, and Colorado, that they weren't doing before?
I think that there is, and it depends on who you ask, there's a little bit more of aggressiveness that you're going to see on defense that they did not have early on. Now, Chip Kelly says they've not changed anything. The players are just executing better. But we have players on record as saying the schemes got simplified. Things got brought back a little bit so that it was just more of a matter of go out and play. Don't overthink things. Don't overanalyze things. Trust your instincts and go out there and play. So the reins have been loosened a little bit defensively. Colorado, for instance, UCLA pretty much handled them very well. But a big part of that was Laviska Shenault, which, who's one of the best receivers in the entire country. UCLA held him to 3 receptions the entire game. Darnay Holmes was in Chenault's jersey as much as Shenault was. So there is when they beat Arizona State, they held Eno Benjamin, one of the best running backs in the country, to a very manageable performance from by UCLA's defense. So there's a little bit more aggressiveness in terms of that. On the offensive side of the ball, you see some spurts from quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson that you weren't seeing before. A little bit more of a flow to his game, a little bit more pace to his game, if you will. A lot less sitting back, looking through 2, 3, 4 options, holding onto the ball too long. His decision making is coming a little bit quicker right now, whether it's finding the receiver or whether it's chucking the ball out of bounds or frankly taking off. I mean, he's picked up a lot of good yardage in the last 3 games. So there's the decision making on his end is coming a little bit quicker as well. There's a little bit more flow to the offense right now.
What is the reasonable expectation for this Saturday? It's on the road at Utah, a difficult place to play. My goodness, they've got the number 1 defense in the Pac-12 statistically, and I believe in reality on the field, it's the best defense in the Pac-12, stacked on all 3 levels,
right,
and gave up 83 total yards in their last outing against Cal. That's some serious laying of the lumber on defense.
Yeah, they've got the number 3 overall defense in the entire country. They're very physical. They're very physical on the defensive line. They get a good push into the backfield. There's not a lot of rushing yards to be gained, and they're putting pressure on the quarterback pretty early on. When we talked to Boss Tagaloa earlier today, his point was we know that they're going to be physical. We have to come out ready to match their intensity. The left side of that UCLA line right now is playing 2 true freshmen in Duke Lemons and Sean Ryan. And those guys are going to have to be ready to have the best game they've ever had, because there is no easy yardage to be gained against Utah. It is going to be cold up there. I think that it's a 5 p.m. Pacific time, so 7 p.m. up there in Salt Lake City. You're looking at temperatures that are supposed to be, at their peak in the high 30s rather. So it's going to be cold. Chip Kelly said there's no way to prepare for that. It is what it is. UCLA doesn't have indoor facilities where they can, pump in cold air or anything like that. It was in the low 80s today in Southern California, and that's what they were practicing in. That's just the reality. He said, so you have to go in with the mindset that you can only control what you can control, forget the elements, forget the other stuff. The other part of it, of course, is as good as their defense is, this is the dictionary definition of a complete team. They've got a great running game with Zach Moss, shredded UCLA last year for about 211 yards. They've got Tyler Huntley at quarterback, who has only 1 interception the entire season. Chip Kelly called him one of the more proficient quarterbacks that they will face all year, maybe even in the entire country. And so, they've got their hands full. Utah is a 21-point favorite for a reason.
No question about that. The Utes have been very solid. They find themselves in the middle of the college football playoff discussion. And really, for the Pac-12, they need Utah and Oregon to show up at the Pac-12 championship game unscathed the rest of the way, meaning 11-1 versus 11-1, with Oregon with a slight favor in regards to the non-conference schedule, having played Auburn and played extremely well for 50 or 55 minutes of that game, and having the game control component against Auburn, despite losing in the last 9 seconds. They would have the nod over Utah, who had the BYU game as their best non-conference effort in the loss to USC as well.
Right.
So if you're a Pac-12 fan, you're rooting for Oregon to sweep and look good against Utah. Maybe not too good to discredit Utah in the Pac-12 championship game, but come away with a solid win in that game. And that's most likely what's going to happen the rest of the way. That's what it appears here. But UCLA fans, hold out hope. 4-2 in the Pac-12. You would have taken that at the start of the Pac-12 season, certainly.
Oh, sure. And look, if they, I mean, look, the Utah game is what it is, and no one, I don't think anyone holds out any irrational hope. There's the fan hope, the rooting hope, but there's no irrational sense of, oh my gosh, we're going to go into Salt Lake City and dominate Utah. It's crazy talk. But look, if UCLA wins 2 of the last 3, they're 6-6. They're bowl eligible. They wind up, I think, last week, our Kevin McGuffey and his weekly bowl projections had UCLA going to the Cheez-It Bowl down in Arizona. You know, it used to be the Cactus Bowl. Hey, if you're a UCLA fan, that's when you started the season 1-5, and you're now 6-6 and going to a bowl game. If you get to that point, because they close after Utah. They've got USC over across town over at the Coliseum, and then Cal at home. So they're winnable. I'm not saying they're going to win them, but they are winnable. And if you wind up at 6-6, that's after 3-9 last year. That's a pretty successful season, you know, for year 2 of Chip Kelly. Like I said, you know, you were talking about with the Utah game and Oregon. You know, one of the things that you're looking at with Oregon is, as you pointed out, they had what most people would say is an acceptable loss week 1 way back when against Auburn. Oregon's challenge from a Pac-12 perspective is what the committee seems to be looking at right now by putting Georgia a couple of spots ahead of them is not comparing the loss, but who's got the better wins. We used to talk about, well, with the 1-loss teams, who's got the better 1 loss, because Georgia's was unimaginable, losing at home to South Carolina, completely unimaginable. But they're looking at the win against Notre Dame, and they're looking at some of those quality wins that Georgia had versus what Oregon had in an otherwise weak out-of-conference schedule, aside from the Auburn game. So, you know, you need to, from a Pac-12 perspective, you're right. You need Utah and Oregon, and you need a close game, and you need Oregon to win it. And Oregon needs help from Auburn. They need Auburn to go beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl, and they need Auburn to look good in the SEC championship game, even win the SEC championship game, to get some help there. Utah needs a little bit more help from a playoff perspective. Their 1 loss is against SC, which right now is a schizophrenic team. You never know what you're going to get out of SC 1 week to the next. And so that loss, you know, hurts a little bit more for Utah.
Well, the game plan on the Auburn side as it pertains to Oregon would beat Georgia and Alabama, or win one of those games. It's a pretty big ask to win both of those games, and
right.
LSU's going to the SEC championship game against Georgia,
sure.
With the win against Alabama.
Sure.
All right, Tony Syracuse on the line. Last word on college football, and it seems like a very reasonable goal for UCLA. Win 2 of the last 3,
sure.
Cal and USC after Utah, and make it a bowl play after. That would have been certainly almost unthinkable at 1-5 to finish up at 6-6, get to postseason play, and continue the progression of the young talent in postseason practices, and maybe go win a postseason game and finish over 500. But for another 2.5 days, Tony, I'm not going to let go of this. You can still win the Pac-12 championship.
You can. Look, they got to win out. They don't need any help from anybody. They don't need any other losses from anyone. They are in control, as you put it, of their fate, of their future. You know, not their destiny, but of their future. They control their own path. You win out, you are the Pac-12 South champ, and you will go play Oregon. What happens from there, you know, don't even worry about it if you're a UCLA fan. Don't even project what Oregon could or might do to you. Just enjoy the ride. As you put it, for another 2.5 days. If they come out of Utah with that win, holy cow, Chip Kelly is going to have to discuss the M word. He's going to have to talk about momentum, whether he wants to or not.
And if UCLA can somehow step off the plane, get acclimated to the weather, they're going to be in shock. Their bodies are going to be in shock. But if they can weather that that shock, and then the shock of the crowd and the momentum. Sorry, Chip. The momentum that Utah likes to build at home and playing in one of the most difficult places to play in college football. If they can get through that first quarter, maybe they've got a puncher's chance to walk out of there with an improbable win.
All right, you come out and you don't make mistakes early on. You keep the game on an even keel, and from there, who knows what happens.
Absolutely. Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. Break it down UCLA with the Bruins postseason hopes still alive. Utah's front and center on Saturday night. Thanks so much, Tony.
All right, Mark, anytime.